Welcome to the Life Lessons Podcast. My name is Doug Spence. So many people ask, what is grief coaching? What is grief coaching? And, how does it work? And so grief is probably one of the most misunderstood emotions that we experience, that commonly believe. What we commonly believe about grief is typically wrong. So one of the beliefs is that it takes years to overcome grief, and even years later you're still going to be grieving, and it can be 20 years later you could still be grieving. This is a really common belief, and there's no way to overcome your grief quicker or easier. And there are the 5 stages of grief, which are also misunderstood. So grief is like any other negative emotion. It's created by a perception. And all of our negative emotions are created by some form of limited perception. Okay, so all of our pain, all of our suffering is created by some form of limited perception. Anger, fear, shame, guilt, apathy. And we can have a limited perception in many different ways. So we can have a limited perception of ourself. Okay? And if we have a limited perception of ourself, we're going to have low self-esteem, and we're not going to have confidence, etc. Okay? We can also have a limited perception of others. And when we have a limited perception of others, we can be highly resentful, or we could be highly infatuated. Okay? And this is the view of positives and negatives, right? The emotional charge is to the positive, or the emotional charge is to the negative. Either way, it's limited in some form. More positives than negatives. More negatives than positives. Now, grief is a little different. Grief is the perception of a big fat zero, a great void, something that's missing. So grief is extremely painful. The greater the void, the greater the pain. And the void can go deep. Right? So it's interesting that antidepressants don't work on grief. And that makes sense. It's a different, when you have a different perception, you create a different chemical imbalance in the brain. So, how do you deal with this? So, the same way you deal with any limited perception is you begin to expand. You begin to expand your perception. So in this case, when somebody loses someone, they tend to get infatuated. They tend to only remember all the best things about the person, all the things they miss. They don't grieve over the dirty underwear and the dirty laundry and the dirty dishes and the stress and the late nights out drinking, or the time they forgot to pick you up, or whatever it was. They don't grieve over those. They just grieve about all the good things that they missed. So when you lose someone, typically we get infatuated and we remember all the best parts of them. And every person is made up of many parts. So part of dissolving your grief is to become balanced in your perception of who they were. Okay? The other part of grief is more connected to your own mission and your own purpose. So you may have had a mission or purpose at the time of knowing this person. But after they've passed, or after they have left you, if it was over a breakup or something like that, your mission is going to change. Your values, what's important to you, is going to change. So you have to connect. You have to get present with your own purpose, your new mission, your new values. You have to reconnect with yourself. There's a big part in doing that, focusing on the future and what you want to create in the future. The other limited perception is the limited perception of the world. The world that they are living in is very limited. So now they're seeing the world as not having whatever it was that they were getting from that other person. If it was hugs, if it was encouragement, if it was great conversation, now they're perceiving a world without those things. So the limited perception of their reality, their world that they live in, is another source of the pain, another perception that creates pain. And this perception can also be expanded. All of these perceptions can be expanded. Any painful emotion is coming from a limited perception. Okay. So continuing to expand your perception of yourself, of others, and of the world, you begin to relieve any grief and any pain and suffering in all forms. Now, there'll be new forms. There'll also be an imbalance in the form. They'll say, well, I liked the old form of hugs, conversation, and etc. And the new form, well, that's not as good. So again, this is a perception of infatuation. So they're not seeing the drawbacks, the downside, the limitation to the old form. And they're seeing more limitation to the new form. So again, these perceptions can be balanced. You can expand the new form to see more positives, and you can limit the old form to balance it out, to show the drawbacks of the old form. Right? Because nobody's perfect. Nobody is perfect. And we have to realize that every trait, every action, every inaction has benefits and drawbacks. So by balancing out these perceptions, by expanding our limited perceptions in the positive or in the negative, and also by expanding our view of what is, our reality, we can dissolve grief. And this does not take a long time. This can be done in a couple of hours. Perception can change very quickly. Our minds have the ability to expand very quickly. There's no reason to be stuck in suffering, in pain, and in grief. Right? And all of the other negative emotions, they can serve us. Yes. They are something we want to experience. We want to feel. Life without feeling there's no point, right? So let's feel our feelings. But when there gets to be a point where you find that these feelings are no longer serving you, then it's time to move on. And there are tools available, little known tools available to help dissolve and overcome these emotions. So if you're interested in grief coaching, reach out to me. I'd love to take you through a grief process and help you discover your mission, your purpose, and move forward and dissolve any painful emotions that are left behind. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.